Try my best. Thank you very much for my presentation. And today, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to talk about risk terminology and methods that are proposed in most known IT management frameworks. These are standards, or they are also called frameworks, that are related to IT governance, IT management, security management, and so on. Why is this practice? That usually it is easier for practitioners, it is easier to take something established and just implement this. Unfortunately, this is not so simple in reality, and I will explain why. After a short introduction of these frameworks, we'll have the several main points of weakness in these frameworks. Afterwards, I will introduce or for someone repeat the good concept of risk, the proper concept of risk, and I will go through several items in these findings in each standards and conclude with the future directions. So to begin with, in management we always have some objectives, and we have already an existing state of our business, of our IT. We'll mostly talk about IT, and we have resources. Resources are always not enough, they're always scarce, and in order to reach our objectives we need to solve certain problems. These problems, unfortunately, need more resources than we have today. This is always like that. Of course, our desired objective or goal means something good for us. And there is also a bad outcome. In the bottom right corner, I believe that this follows from practice and also from the theory that, okay, something bad may happen, we may go into worse state than today, and this is undesirable. We need to manage the resources and prioritize them and the problems and objectives such that we can accomplish and transform to another good state, to another desired state. How to do this? Can these frameworks help us? This seems to be risk management, and in this way, what is called risk? What is called risk there? I have covered 4 questions in this study. First, what is risk in their terms? What is proposed as methods in order to analyze and manage risk? Is risk linked to business? Is IT risk linked to business risk? And finally, how to measure effectiveness of our control? If we apply management controls, then how to see if we do it well or not, if we really decrease the risk or not. What is proposed for that? I have seen 9 frameworks, and some of them are simply different versions. It was also interesting to see how they expand during time. Do they correct any deficiencies or not? And so we begin. Now there are several main points that I found in all of these frameworks. So they are all just heuristics. This is a set of advice. They say this follows from practical experience, probably from those who have written them. So there is nothing established. This is simply an advice that may help or may not help. And moreover, the implementation and responsibility of this implementation is absolutely on the practitioner, on the user of these frameworks. Next, there are assumptions. And one of the most important assumptions is that everyone understands everything unanimously. We understand risk in the same way. We agree on our definitions and agree on our subjective perception of the metrics and measures that are proposed. This is not always true, unfortunately. Okay, there are no any reference to testing of what they proposed. Tests of effectiveness, empirical success rate, or something similar. But it is established, they say it is like a proven heuristic. Next, IT is considered, IT risk is mainly an operational risk. I believe this is because it is easier to get information, to collect data from operational activity and measure it. Finally, risk is categorized. There are risk registers, and it is not very clear how to maintain them because it takes resources to just maintain these registers. There is enormous number of possible bad events to any object, and how to choose, how to prioritize those that are relevant is a good question. Lastly, a positive risk. This is a relatively new trend. So where people try to mix everything good and everything bad under the name risk. While in the past, there was a name opportunity for a good event, for a good outcome or something good that may happen. Now we may see that the definitions itself, they are very different in all these IT-related standards and frameworks. It is sometimes an event, sometimes it is just an uncertainty, sometimes it is probability, and sometimes an effect, some complex dependency, a combination, for instance. Sometimes it is simple, sometimes not, and of course, especially in the newer versions, there are positive and negative outcomes or effects or something. So we can see that there is no any common notion. However, they refer to each other in order to support each other. Many of these frameworks refer to ISO standards in order to support management activities. So see management activities there. But what is the main subject of interest, it may be different. So those who have read one standard may not agree with those who have read, or may not understand those who have read another one. Well, now let's approach the risk closer. What is it like? It is actually based on two main notions. First is uncertainty, that is lack of information. We may not know what will happen. We may have several proposals in our head, but we still may not be certain. Also, we may not know everything about technology. We may not know everything about our processes or some influences from outside. This is our uncertainty. If we knew everything, then it is clear that there is no uncertainty and there is no risk. We know what to do. And the second issue is exposure. We need to be cared about something. For instance, about the objective or opportunities or reaching goals or something like that. We need to care. And something bad that may happen must worry us. We need to be unhappy if something bad will realize and we don't reach the goals. So on the other hand, if we don't care, if we are not exposed, then we are observers and there is no risk for us. Whatever happens, we don't lose anything. Therefore, only with these factors together, we can talk about risk. Whose risk is this? Whose risk is this? There should be a decision maker with these objectives and subjective perception who should care about this risk. So this is the truth. And this truth is not there, is not in the frameworks. Well, now let's go briefly through the frameworks and what are the main findings there, the main issues or bricks in them. So first, COVID, this is IT governance framework. It has a specific process, or even two processes, to manage risk. Unfortunately, it is not very clear, are these processes separated standalone processes to other business processes, to business processes that produce value to the company, or they are somehow included in those business processes. But the simple notion of a risk management process is interesting in itself. And also because it is interesting because they need resources. Any process needs resources, then this process needs to struggle for resources. Next, they refer to ISO standards to support risk control activities. Also, they base their analysis on subjective scores or ordinal scales. And finally, they maintain these risk registers, risk classifiers, without advice how to do it effectively. Finally, they, of course, differentiate between strategic and operational risk. So ITIL, it is about service management, and in IT service management, they stress the importance of understanding and knowledge about IT processes and infrastructure. This is good. They also refer to other standards for risk control, and unfortunately, they also give only examples of ordinal scales in risk analysis, risk classification in registers, and they also differentiate strategic and operational risks. Next, project management standard PMBOK has unfortunately a great ambiguity about their terms of risk and non-risk. Finally, next, they refer to other standards as well. They also give only subjective scores and ordinal values in risk analysis, and also support risk classification. ISO standards for general risk management and IT security risk management. They also support risk classification, ordinal scales, and fortunately, they stress measurement, but without any good examples. So they have, unfortunately, in the recent version, ambiguity between potential and risk, and without any comments on this. And finally, they have a good discussion about origin of risk origin. And finally, an American standard related to information security management has a relatively good notions of risk-related terms in comparison to others in this review. They also have the same ordinal scales and risk classification, but they and actually PMBOK have this lessons learned process where we need to study on our mistakes.
Maksim, you have 2 minutes left. Excuse me.
2 minutes left. Perfect. Perfect timing. So now let's summarize. So I have answered all my questions, and unfortunately not affirmative. So they don't have good risk notions for management. They don't propose really good proven methods and techniques based on numbers, good numbers. And they don't have any metrics in order to see whether we manage risk well or not enough. But as a good sign, they differentiate between business risk and IT risk, and also they see IT risks as subset of business risks. Now, how can we as scientists help in this situation? I believe that we can promote good definition and good notions and good methods, useful methods, really proven methods for analysis. And I plan to continue this work and develop really a number of advice how to improve the risk-related frameworks for IT management, where we can see how can we align different techniques and methods for management, specifically for management, not for engineers. Finally, how to effectively control risk management activity, what can be good KPIs, what is the loop back control in terms of engineering for management. So this is my future plan in this small research area. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you, Maksim, for your session.